How much protein should you have on a carnivore diet? Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name's Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. So I've been doing this carnivore diet for quite a while now, quite a few years, and zero carb for a few years before that. And if there's one thing I did play with was protein ratios, protein to fat ratios, because those are my only two food options. I don't have carbohydrates to the best of my ability. There's always going to be trace amounts of carbohydrates in your food. But the reality is we're trying to be as zero carb as possible. So your only fuel source at that point is fat and protein. Protein's not really a good fuel source. So fat is your major fuel source. Protein is your building block. So we want to make sure we're getting enough protein. I don't agree with a low protein diet for a very long time. If you want to do that for a few weeks or maybe a few months, that's one thing. That's not enough to create any sort of nutritional deficiencies, especially if you're exercising with resistance exercises, not just body weight, but maybe also with weight resistance. I think that's something you need to do regardless. If you are on a low protein diet, that is a necessity because your body will start eating itself. So what you want to do is not worry too much about the amount of protein you're getting. If you really need a certain amount of protein and you're a numbers person, I recommend starting at 0.7 grams for every pound of lean mass that you have. So if you're a 200-pound person, you want to be at 170 pounds, 0.7 grams has been the gold standard that most people recommend for the longest time. But keep in mind, that is just a starting point. Not everyone requires that much, and some people need more. The first week I ever did carnivore back in the spring of 2018, I remember being blown away because I put on muscle after a week of doing a carnivore diet. My waistline got smaller and my legs got thicker. My legs and glutes got thicker, and I wasn't doing any exercise. And you might stop and say to yourself, well, wait a minute. How could you have put on lean mass if you weren't doing any exercise? And here's how. Now, depending on your activity level, if you weren't getting enough protein in your diet for a long period of time, your body was sort of malnourished and it wanted to have a faster metabolism. It wanted to have more skeletal mass and it wanted to have more muscle mass, and your organs wanted to be a little thicker and stronger, but you weren't giving your body enough fuel to do that. So you were sort of running at maybe 80 or 90%, maybe 95%. Who knows? It's just a made up number to get my point across. But when I started giving myself more than enough protein, and I was probably having about 5 to 6 pounds of meat a day, ground beef typically, and I filled out my quads and my butt like I was doing a few weeks of heavy squat training. And I've got a large history with weight training, so I know how my body reacts when I start exercising and combining that with good diet. And I was blown away that after a week, I had tight pants in my quads and in my butt, but they were looser on the waist. I expected my pants to be a little looser after a week because I de-bloated from getting rid of the carbohydrates. My body just wasn't holding on to the water, so I wasn't retaining as much. That's typically what happens in the first week when someone goes to a zero carb diet. If you have a high activity level, say you walk a lot, and I had a dog, so I was walking a lot. I was typically on my feet all day with work. Now, there was a bit of sitting in that job, but there was also a lot of standing and pushing because I'm a massage therapist. So I was active. I just wasn't crazy active, but I was the right type of active that I still needed more protein requirements because before I did carnivore, I was living off of junk food. So I was getting lots of carbohydrates and I was probably on a low protein diet. So I found going to a low protein diet for long windows of time without exercise, I lose muscle mass. I do. They say you don't do that, but I do. Now, if I intermittent fast and I'm getting the slightest bit of activity, like push-ups, a little bit of push-ups, 5 or 10 minutes of just little exercises throughout the day, I find I maintain my lean mass just fine. But if I'm not exercising and you're not exercising with any body weight or weight resistance training at all, I think you'll lose muscle mass. I think that's just inevitable. So you can combat that by making sure you're getting enough protein, and that's going to help keep your metabolism running optimally. If you go chronically long windows of time with really low protein, you will lose muscle mass if you're not training. So I always found whenever I lost weight, the first thing I lost was, and I'm talking about when I yo-yo dieted, the first thing I lost was lean mass. And then I would start losing water weight in that first little while. And while I was losing all the weight, whether it's 20 pounds, 40 pounds, or 60 pounds, I would balance out at whatever number I was balancing out at. And eventually when I went off that way of eating, I would put on maybe my first 10 pounds, and that was lean mass. I always found that from all the years I yo-yo dieted, because I could easily lose weight whenever I wanted. I don't have that metabolic flexibility anymore. So I find when I'm getting more protein, here's the issue I have. You get too much protein, it's going to create a little more of an insulin spike. Now, when you eat anything, your insulin goes up. If you eat fat, yes, your insulin goes up modestly, but your insulin does go up. If you eat protein, you get more of an insulin bump because your blood sugar goes up with that meal. If you get carbohydrates, it spikes. So right off the bat, cutting out carbohydrates typically stops the sugar spikes, which stops the insulin spikes. And most people lose weight. But if you're metabolically challenged like I was, and that sounds like a polite way of just saying, hey, you're a fat person. But it's true. If your metabolism is challenged and it's messed up and it's been going through a yo-yo cycle for years and years and years, or you've just been overweight for a really long time, it's not going to respond as easily. Your hormones are off, and insulin is a hormone. So it's going to take longer to bounce back whenever you have a big meal, even if it's carnivore. And I'm at the point where I was still dealing with chronically high insulin, even though I was on a high fat carnivore diet. I find that's one aspect of the problem. Now I also have other hormone problems that are out of balance, and that all comes into play, and most of which revolves around my metabolism. So I don't think anyone has a specific number they need to start at. If you really need it, the 0.7 is a great way to start. But you might find if you're active in the gym or you're active with a physically demanding job, you might need 0.8, maybe 1 gram, maybe 1.5 grams. If you're on any sort of weight gainers or like protein powders, or you're taking any sort of hormone enhancing drugs, you might need more than that. But for the average person out there, between 0.7 to 1 grams is enough. More than enough for the average person. If you don't have much lean mass and you're not working on building any lean mass, then maybe you can get away with a little less. I feel if you're just starting carnivore for at least the first number of months, 6 months, maybe even up to a year, unless you're hitting weight plateaus that last months, I think you should just eat intuitively. Eat until you're satisfied, drink water. If you want, throw some salt in there, but eat as much as you want or can, stay comfortably full, and then if you start having issues, then start playing around with your eating windows or the amounts of food you get or the amounts of protein and fat, playing with the macros, and go from there. But typically, I really think you just need to start doing carnivore. Don't complicate it. Start complicating it when your situation becomes complicated, if it becomes complicated. But for the most part, get in tune with your hunger signals first, get in tune with your body, and find out what you need. Don't overthink the situation. But if you need to, don't go by the amount of ounces your food is. Go by the amount of grams you're getting, okay? You need to watch for numbers. Go by grams. And remember, you're always better off eating a little bit over than a little bit under on a carnivore diet. Trust me on that. If you eat a little under, there's a good chance you're just slowing your metabolism. A little under might be okay if we're talking like 100 or 200 calories, but there's no way to tell exactly what is in a calorie, and there's no way to actually tell exactly what your body requires. It's as much of an art as it is a science. So you have to keep that in mind. The science comes in with the numbers and what we project each calorie to be with certain foods that we eat. And then our metabolism, there's the science behind it. Then there's the art behind it, what our hormones are saying. And if our hormones are saying we need a little less fuel because it's creating too much of an insulin spike, and you're not exercising after each meal, and I'm talking moderate exercise, 5 or 10 minutes of activity, then yeah, you're going to have to start getting that under control before you start getting the amount of fuel under control. Some people get good results this way. Some people get good results the other way. So don't get hung up on the numbers. Just eat carnivore, get rid of the carbohydrates, and 90% of you out there are going to do great. It's going to be the odd small group of people afterwards that are still struggling. So thanks a lot. I want you to take care. If you can, hit the bell notification. Make sure that you're getting all the notifications for the channel. I find lots of people have been telling me that they just haven't been getting all the notifications. Thanks. Cheers.